All right. Good evening. My name is Alexa. Thank you all for coming to the workshop tonight. If you've attended Special Needs Cobb's workshops before, welcome back. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. I'm glad that you're here. And for those of you in the future who are viewing this as a recording, thank you for watching. We're going to start off by briefly reviewing some Zoom etiquette, and I'm going to let you know some of the settings that we've put in place for this meeting. I'm going to send out a very short poll to confirm that you can see and hear me, and I'll give about everybody 30 seconds or so to respond. Let me just put that up real quick. All right, cool. Looks like everybody can see and hear me. That's a good thing. All right. So again, this meeting, it's being recorded for future use. If you're not okay with your name, your voice, or your picture being recorded, if you're on camera, then go ahead and leave. There will be a recording available later on. Microphones are muted and locked. We're going to ask that you hold all of your questions until the end. Since we have kind of a decent sized group in here, we're going to be using the raise hand feature in chat to answer your questions, but we'll talk more about that when we get to our Q&A section. We'd love to see your faces, but I know it's Thursday night. You might be getting kids ready for bed, making dinner. So feel free to turn the camera off if you need to. Additionally, if you're doing anything that might come off as distracting to other people, go ahead and turn off your camera. Last workshop, I told everyone a story about how a workshop I was in a few months ago, someone was ironing their entire load of laundry for the week, and it was the most distracting thing. I still don't remember what that workshop was about. I just remember that guy ironing all of his shirts. It was the weirdest thing. So if you have any further tech issues, just message us in the chat, and I'll try to get them resolved once Kim starts her presentation. I'm going to go back to the waiting room real quick and admit our friends in here. And I'm going to turn off the signal so we're not hearing people enter and exit constantly throughout the meeting, so don't worry about that. All right, so now that all the tech stuff is out of the way, my name is Alexa Waters. I'm your moderator for this evening. I'm the Special Projects Coordinator at Special Needs Cobb here in Marietta, Georgia. Special Needs Cobb is Cobb County's original special needs organization. We've been in operation for over 66 years. We own and maintain 22 group homes for special needs adults in Cobb County, one in Bartow County, and we also provide facility-based respite services and other supports for special needs families, such as this workshop. Our presenter tonight is attorney Kim Martin. Kim is a trust and estate attorney and focuses her work on estate planning for special needs families. She's a partner at Harrison and Held LLP, and she's a board member here at Special Needs Cobb. Best of all, she's a mom of 2 kids, one of whom has autism. We're so happy to have her here tonight to talk to us about special needs benefits. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kim, and I'll see you guys at the Q&A. Unmute yourself, Kim. Oh, I have to unmute you. I'm so sorry. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yay, all right. Okay, So thank you so much, Alexa, for working so hard to make this talk happen and being very patient with me and my technological ineptitude, which is profound, but I'm trying.
It's okay.
So if some weird thing happens halfway through this talk, just hang in there and we'll fix it. But so as Alexa mentioned, I am an attorney and my practice is focused entirely on various types of special needs work. I'm not going to read you my credentials because you can all read. I do feel that probably my greatest credential is that I'm a special needs mom. And when my son was first diagnosed many years ago with autism, I had never heard of Katie Beckett. I didn't know what benefits were. I didn't know why I needed them. I didn't know how to get them. And then I went from being a tax lawyer to reinventing my entire practice and focusing exclusively on special needs work. And it was really partly self-interest because I wanted to know all the things that I needed to know to take care of my son. So it's a huge and fascinating area of law. I don't think there are enough people doing it. And I am so grateful to my son, Finn, because he's the reason that I do this work. So before we get started for real, I have to give you my little legal disclaimer and let you know that the purpose of this meeting is purely educational. So nothing that I say today should be considered to be legal advice. It's just me giving you general educational information. Any opinions that I express during this talk are just purely my own opinions, and I am not speaking on behalf of any state or county entity or any other organization. And finally, and most important, this meeting is not a substitute for a sit-down one-on-one meeting with an attorney who knows what your situation is and who can give you recommendations that are based on your personal facts. So again, this is really just general information that's intended to give everybody as much education and guidance as possible. So before we can really talk about benefits in general, we have to know about this thing called the means test. And the means test is a resource test. It applies to a lot of different types of benefits that we're going to talk about tonight. But basically, the means test is if someone who is applying for means tested benefits has more than $2,000 in non-exempt resources, then they fail the means test and they cannot qualify for means tested benefits. So exempt versus non-exempt resources causes a lot of confusion until you get accustomed to what Social Security considers to be exempt or not exempt. Exempt resources would include any assets of any amount that you put into a special needs trust. There are various types of special needs trusts. The two most commonly used ones are third-party special needs trusts, which are sort of classic estate planning trusts, and first-party special needs trusts that are more, they're kind of more like damage control trusts. We're going to talk about that the next time we do a talk here in a month or so in great detail. So I'm really not going to talk about special needs trusts much today. But any assets that you place into a properly drafted special needs trust, regardless of what type of trust it is, those assets are considered to be an exempt resource for purposes of applying for benefits. Assets in an ABLE account are also considered to be an exempt resource, but not for an unlimited amount of money. So once an ABLE account exceeds $100,000, then the assets over and above that $100,000 will begin to count against your child for SSI purposes. ABLE accounts are still relatively new, and there are limits on what amounts can be put into them every year. So there may not even be an ABLE account out there yet that has $100,000 in it, but that's the rule. If your child is the beneficiary of a 529 college savings plan, there's no need to worry about that because very likely that college savings plan is owned by somebody else. It's owned by mom or dad or grandma or grandpa. And as long as the child is just the beneficiary and not the owner, then the assets in that 529 account do not count as a resource that's available to the child. And the reason for that is because the owner of that plan has the power to change the beneficiary at will. And the child can't do anything about it. The child doesn't have any sort of an enforceable ownership interest in those assets. So don't panic if your well-meaning grandparents opened a 529 account for your child back when they were born, and now you're realizing that they may be applying for SSI. Non-exempt resources, the obvious one is if your child has a bank account with his name on it, or anything with his name on it, again, well-intentioned grandparents will sometimes give their little newborn grandchildren something like 5 shares of Disney stock or savings bonds or something else. And if they put it in the child's name, that is a non-exempt resource that belongs to the child and counts towards that $2,000 limit. If your child is the beneficiary of a trust that is not a special needs trust, and there's magic language that we'll talk about next month that makes a trust a special needs trust. If your child is the beneficiary of a regular trust that is not a special needs trust, then all of the assets in that trust that are available for the use of your child are considered a non-exempt resource available to your child. A lot of people are surprised to find out that child support payments that are made for the benefit of a special needs child are considered income to the child, which will reduce SSI or could potentially eliminate it. And if any of those payments remain in the month after the month in which they're paid, then those child support payments are also considered a non-exempt resource. And finally, if your child is in an accident or is maybe a victim of medical malpractice or is involved in some sort of lawsuit as a plaintiff, and they get damages awarded to them as a result of that lawsuit, then that settlement money is a non-exempt resource unless the court has directed those assets into a first-party special needs trust. So the benefits that are means tested are the ones that your child is most likely to get early in his life. The two big ones are SSI and Medicaid. So SSI is known as supplemental security insurance or income, and it pays a monthly benefit, and it's intended to be used for food and shelter. The amount that gets paid for SSI changes every year. It gets adjusted every year for inflation. So some years it goes up $3, some years it goes up $11. So it's often sort of a strange number. For this year, 2022, the maximum amount that you can get in SSI in a given month is $841. But SSI payments can be reduced or even eliminated altogether if the recipient of the SSI has countable income or support from some other source. And we'll talk about that in more details later. Medicaid is the other big means tested benefit. That's a program that provides basic medical and hospital care. It pays for prescription drugs and long-term care. And there are over 30 different types of Medicaid. But the type of Medicaid that you're most likely to qualify for as a young child or even as a young adult in Georgia is essentially medical insurance. So a thing to remember about Medicaid benefits is Medicaid keeps a running tally of all the money that they spend on a Medicaid recipient for that person's lifetime. And at the death of the Medicaid recipient, Medicaid seeks payback. It's called estate recovery. So they will seek reimbursement from the estate of the person who received Medicaid. If that person has an ABLE account, that's also subject to Medicaid payback. And if there is a first party special needs trust in place, the assets in that trust are also, again, subject to Medicaid payback. So that's distinguished from a third party special needs trust. That's the classic estate planning trust. Assets in a third party special needs trust are not subject to Medicaid payback, but assets in a first party trust would be. Another means tested benefit that a lot of parents, I think, don't think about is SNAP benefits. So that's it. It's what we used to call food stamps. But SNAP benefits are something that your child should qualify for, assuming that they can pass the means test. And I have a slide on that later, so we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Section 8 housing, which is subsidized housing, is a means tested benefit. In Georgia, Section 8 housing is kind of, it's not something that people pay a whole ton of attention to because there's such a shortage of Section 8 housing in Georgia that it's, you know, whether you qualify for it or not, it just may not be available for most people. And then there is another little known trust fund that is a trust fund that exists for people who have a traumatic brain injury or a spinal cord injury. And there's a slide about that later as well. So we'll get into detail about that later, but that is also a means tested benefit. The two big benefits that are not means tested are Medicare, which is different from Medicaid, and SSDI, which is different from SSI. We will talk about all of that later. But the big thing to take away from this slide is really that SSI and Medicaid are means tested. So SSI, as I mentioned, is a benefit that pays $841 a month for this year. That'll adjust upward for inflation. It is means tested, as we talked about. There's also an income test that applies to SSI. So if your child is qualified for SSI, but maybe they have a part-time job and they're earning some money, not 100% of what they earn, but approximately half of what they earn will offset SSI dollar for dollar. So it's possible that they qualify for $841 a month, but they're making some money and that $841 a month is getting reduced a little bit because they have a job and they're earning money. So if your child at any point has too many resources, so they have more than $2,000 in non-exempt resources, or if they have too much income, and that includes child support, then they can lose SSI. We determine whether or not they pass the means test based on what they have in their possession on the first day of any given month. So it's possible that they may fail the means test in one particular month, and then you might spend down their money or put it into an ABLE account or into a first party special needs trust. And then they're back down below $2,000, and the next month they qualify for SSI again. So that can happen. So the way that you qualify for SSI is, first of all, in order to qualify for any of these benefits that we're talking about today, you have to meet the statutory definition of disabled. And that definition for an adult is you have to have a diagnosis of some type of condition that prevents you from engaging in what's called substantial gainful activity, which is often abbreviated to SGA. Substantial gainful activity is an earnings test. So that number also changes every year. It adjusts for inflation every year. But in 2022, you are considered to be engaging in substantial gainful activity if you can consistently earn more than $1,350 a month, assuming that you have this required disability diagnosis and you are not blind. If your diagnosis is blindness, then your SGA number is $2,260 a month. So assuming that your child has a diagnosis of some condition that prevents them from engaging in substantial gainful activity, then they have met the statutory definition of disabled. And then we start to look at what their resources are and what their income is. So assuming that they meet that statutory definition, then they have to pass the means test. And this is why most of our kids don't get SSI until they're 18 years old. Until your child is 18, all the resources in the family are going to be considered the child's resources. And that's because until our children are 18, we have to take care of them. Once they turn 18, they are considered a household of one for benefits purposes. Because legally, even though we're not going to do this, legally, we could say, okay, good luck to you. Off you go, right? If you get work, we're not required to provide our children with any kind of support anymore after age 18. And so once they turn 18, they are a household of one. And that's regardless of whether they live with mom and dad, regardless of whether mom and dad are supporting them 100%, regardless of anything else. When they turn 18, they are considered to be a household of one by Social Security. And that means Social Security stops paying attention to what mom and dad have, and they only pay attention to what the child has. So that's when our kids most likely are able to pass that $2,000 means test, which qualifies them for SSI. So the last hurdle they have is they have to pass the income test. And income for SSI purposes includes both earned and unearned income. So that's where things like child support or payments from an IRA, if they've inherited an IRA, or anything, any kind of income from any source, is going to count towards that income test. So assuming that they pass all of those tests, they will qualify for their $841 a month in SSI. There are ways that SSI can be reduced and lost. And obviously, if you fail the means test as of the first day of the month, then you've lost SSI for that month. But there's another test that trips people up sometimes. It's called the In-Kind Support and Maintenance Test. It's sometimes referred to by Social Security as ISM. So because SSI is supposed to pay for food and shelter, and that's where all of your food and shelter costs are supposed to come from, if you get food and shelter from any source other than SSI or an ABLE account, then you are getting in-kind support and maintenance according to Social Security, which means if your child is over 18 and they live in your house with you and you let them sleep in their bed and eat out of the refrigerator and you're not charging them anything, then you're providing your child with free food and shelter. And Social Security is going to say you're giving your child in-kind support and maintenance. And what they'll do if they detect in-kind support and maintenance happening is they will reduce your child's SSI benefit by a third. So that $841 will become $560 a month. There are ways around this. And the easiest thing to do if your child lives with you is to just have them sign a room and board agreement, which is essentially a lease. So it's, you're renting out your child's room to him and you're saying, I'm going to, under this agreement, you're going to pay me X number of dollars a month and I am selling you all of your food and shelter. So the reason this works if your child lives with you is that you have control over what those food and shelter costs are going to be. You're supposed to charge fair market value for that food and shelter, but that's somewhat subject to opinion. So if you decide that you want to have a room and board agreement with your child, if they're not getting $841 a month in SSI, and this is the reason why, then just make sure that you charge them less than they're getting in SSI so that you can show Social Security, look, nobody's giving him food and shelter. We're charging him for it. He's paying us, and he's paying us entirely out of the SSI money. So if your child is under guardianship, that might raise some issues here, because if your child is under guardianship, then they don't have the capacity legally to sign a room and board agreement. They can't be bound by contracts that they sign. So if your child is under guardianship and you are your child's guardian, then you can sign on behalf of your child if you have a room and board agreement. The other way to address this issue is the only other source of money other than Social Security money, SSI money, that is allowed to pay for food and shelter without reducing SSI is money that comes out of an ABLE account. And we will talk about that a bit more later, but that's a useful thing to know about if you don't have control over what your child's food and shelter costs are. So if your child lives in a group home or a private facility like Just People or Annandale Village, then you don't get to tell them how much the food and shelter costs are going to be. They just are what they are, and they're almost certainly going to be more than $841 a month. So we'll talk more about that later, but that's an issue that affects a lot of families. So then another thing that can reduce or sometimes eliminate SSI is, we've talked already about this income test. If income is being paid for your child, for example, if child support is being paid, even if the child support is getting paid to a parent, once the child is over 18, what they'll do is disregard the first $20 of those payments, and then all the rest of it offsets SSI dollar for dollar. If the child is under age 18, then they'll do the $20 disregard, and they'll disregard 1/3 of the payment, and the remaining 2/3 would offset SSI dollar for dollar. The way to fix that problem is if these payments are being made pursuant to a settlement agreement in a divorce, the settlement agreement can direct that child support payments be made to a D4A trust. That's another name for a first party special needs trust. So that's totally beyond the scope of today's talk, but I'm just mentioning it as a thing that could reduce or even potentially eliminate SSI. So far down the path of benefits, someday your child will very likely go from SSI to SSDI. So that's another type of Social Security, but it's got different rules and different characteristics. So the SSI, as we've talked about, is means tested. SSDI is not. There are two ways potentially that your child could qualify someday for SSDI. SSDI is a Social Security payment that's based on the disability of the recipient and that recipient's inability to work. So if your child has a work record it's usually they require more than 40 quarters of work, but they will sometimes abbreviate that requirement if your child is too young to have 40 quarters of work. So it's possible that if your child has worked for a certain number of years and then their condition gets worse and prevents them from working going forward, they might potentially qualify for SSDI based on their own work record. That is not likely to be a whole ton of money because they're not likely to have made a bunch of money, and they're going to do this math based on your child's history of earnings. So it's possible that your child could be on SSDI for some of their monthly benefit And if their SSDI is less than the maximum amount of SSI that's payable in that year, they might also still be getting some SSI. So if we're looking at this year, let's say we've got a child who worked for enough years to qualify for SSDI based on their own work record. And now, their condition has gotten worse, and it's gotten to the point where they're just not able to work anymore. So they're getting, let's say, $200 a month in SSDI based on their own work record. Well, that's a lot less than $841 a month. So they might get $200 a month in SSDI and $641 a month in SSI. So the other way that your child could potentially move from SSI to SSDI is based on the work record of a parent. If your child has a diagnosis of a condition that was discovered and diagnosed before the child reached age 22, and if the child is not married, which means once you're married, you're emancipated, so you no longer qualify for SSDI based on a parent's work record. But assuming that we have a diagnosis before age 22, and assuming that your child is not married, then if one of the parents either dies or becomes disabled and begins to draw Social Security disability themselves, or retires and just starts to draw Social Security based on their own work record, if any one of those three things happens, then your child will roll automatically from SSI to SSDI, and they'll be able to take distributions based on the work record of the parent. So the way that they do the calculations, the child's SSDI payment ends up being about half of whatever the parent is entitled to. It doesn't reduce the parent's ability to collect their full Social Security, but it's that the parent's numbers are what they base that calculation on. So if a parent retires and they start to draw Social Security and they're getting, say, $3,000 a month in Social Security, the child would go from SSI to SSDI, and they'd get about $1,500 a month. So it's usually substantially more than SSI. SSDI is an easier benefit to be on, because where SSI is reduced by any kind of income, earned or unearned, SSI is only reduced by earned income. So I have had clients before who own lots and lots of rental properties, and they rent out the properties and they collect the rents, but they're elderly and they're disabled, and they qualify for SSDI because they don't have jobs, and rental property income is not considered to be earned income. So it's easier to have sources of income and still collect SSDI than it is to stay on SSI. Also, there is no ISM issue with SSDI. So SSDI is for whatever you want or need it for. It does not have to pay for food and shelter. We don't care where your food and shelter costs come from anymore once you're on SSDI. So that's nice. 2 years after you go on SSDI, then you also qualify for Medicare as opposed to Medicaid. And Medicare is the same thing that all of us are going to get when we turn 65. It's just basically free medical insurance. So 2 years after your child begins to get SSDI, they will get Medicare. SSI is statutorily linked in Georgia and in a lot of states to Medicaid, which means once your child qualifies for SSI, they will also automatically get Medicaid. I mean, they're not going to send you a card out of the blue. You have to go to Medicaid and you have to sign up for Medicaid, but you don't really have to apply for it. You just show them that your child has SSI, and they will give you a Medicaid card for your child. So Medicaid is there are so many different types of Medicaid that it's almost meaningless to just say that you're on Medicaid. But before your child turns 18, there are likely to be two sources of Medicaid dollars that they might be eligible for. The first one is the Katie Beckett deeming waiver that I'm sure anybody with young kids has heard of. It is a Medicaid waiver. And the reason it's called a deeming waiver is because Medicaid is a means tested benefit, right? So if you've got a minor child, then we're going to look at the resources available to the whole family, which should disqualify the child in most cases from getting any means tested benefits. But if you can show that your child has a disability that is profound enough and that is permanent and is, likely to result in challenges to your child, then you can qualify for the Katie Beckett deeming waiver, which will allow your child to get Medicaid until the age of 18, even if the family assets would otherwise disqualify them. And then there's another source of Medicaid money that's available in many counties in Georgia, including Cobb County, and it's called family support. So family support isn't Medicaid per se, but it's funded with Medicaid dollars. And it's not a check that you get in the mail, and it's not medical insurance. It's a fund that you can draw from to provide your child with any type of training or support that will help them to be integrated into the community and to live their best life, basically. So, for example, my son is on family support, and it pays for, before COVID, when there were summer camps, it paid for summer camps. It pays for him to have private swimming lessons. It will pay for a family membership to a gym or a community pool. It'll pay for art classes. It'll pay for all kinds of things that are just intended to help the child to build a life, to build social skills and confidence. So it's a great benefit to look into. It's kind of a consolation prize, really, until you get either a now waiver or a comp waiver. So, and we'll talk more about those later. But until your child gets one of those big Medicaid waivers, they may qualify for family support. You do have to have a diagnosis of intellectual disability in order to qualify for family support. So until your child turns 18, that's likely to be all that they qualify for. 18 is this big magic age in benefits land because, as I mentioned before, at the age of 18, your child is considered a household of one for purposes of the means test. So assuming that nobody has done anything crazy like give him lots and lots of money, then that's when your child should qualify for SSI, which will then get your child Medicaid, which is the medical insurance that is called Medicaid. Once you qualify for Medicaid, you should immediately get your child on the regional planning list for the now comp waivers. It could easily be decades before your child actually gets one of these waivers. This varies a lot from state to state, but Georgia is one of the states that has opted not to fund its Medicaid waivers. So Georgia has taken the federal Medicaid dollars that all the states get, and they have said, this is all the money we have to fund these Medicaid waivers. Many states have subsidized that waiver money with state money, but Georgia doesn't do that. So there is a waiting list that's over 7,000 people long, I believe, the last time I heard, for these now comp waivers. And in past years, Georgia has opened up 100 new waivers every year. I think this year they opened up over 200, and that was just unprecedented. So that is excellent, but we've still got 7,000 people who are waiting for the now comp waivers. But you should get on the waiting list because that is one of the things that you will need to do in order to qualify for family support. So family support has a limit of $3,000 a year, but it's a nice benefit to have, and it will pay for some nice things that will be fun for your child and will help them to integrate and develop social skills and all those good things. So way far down the line, when your child is on potentially SSDI and then 2 years later is on Medicare, there's a type of Medicaid that will pay for the monthly premium for the supplemental Medicare. So if you're familiar with Medicare, you already know that there is the sort of fundamental core Medicare that everybody gets when they turn 65, and that is free. But then there are all these different types of supplemental Medicare. So for example, there's a prescription drug benefit. And if you want those types of supplemental Medicare, you can have them, but you have to pay a monthly premium for them. Well, if your child still passes the means test, once they go on to SSDI and they get Medicare, then Medicaid, the type of Medicaid called QBT Medicaid, will pay the monthly premium for them to get supplemental Medicare. Even further down your child's path, if they ever reach a point where they need a nursing home level of care, which is highly specific, that doesn't mean they're elderly and they have to go to assisted living. They have to need specifically a nursing home level of care. But if that happens, there is another type of Medicaid that's called nursing home Medicaid. And not surprisingly, it pays for your child to be in a nursing home. Again, that is means tested, and it can be reduced depending on whether your child has income from other sources. So for example, their SSDI payment will reduce what nursing home Medicaid will pay. If they are the beneficiary of an inherited IRA, or if they have a retirement account of their own from money that they earned while they were younger and working, then the required minimum distributions from those IRA accounts would also reduce what nursing home Medicaid will pay. But nursing home Medicaid is a thing that's out there, and if it's needed, it's always good to be able to pass that means test forever. So I'll just keep in mind as well, I already mentioned this, but there is a payback requirement at death. So at your child's death, Medicaid is going to pull out this long itemized list of all the things they've ever paid for, and they are going to seek reimbursement from your child's estate and from any able accounts that are in existence and from any first-party special needs trusts. If there isn't any money, then there is no payback. So they will only seek reimbursement to the extent that there's money in the child's estate. So there's not likely to be a whole lot. It's not something to worry about a whole lot, but it's a thing that's out there. So sometimes people panic because their child is on Katie Beckett Medicaid and they turn 18 and it stops. And they're in the process of applying for SSI, but they haven't gotten SSI yet. So they don't have the Medicaid that's linked to SSI. And, Katie Beckett is not that useful to some families, but then to other families, it's absolutely essential. I have clients who have a very medically fragile child who is on some really expensive and really essential drugs that cost $4,000 a month. And if they lost Medicaid, they would be in serious trouble. So if you're one of those families that really needs Katie Beckett and really depends on it, then don't panic if your child turns 18 and Katie Beckett goes away, because what you need to do is you file for SSI as quickly as you can. You can't file until the child is actually 18, but once your child has turned 18, file for SSI, and Social Security is going to give you something called an application summary that will show that you've applied for SSI. So you take your application summary, you send a copy of it to the Katie Beckett unit of the Department of Community Health, and you say, we would like to extend Katie Beckett for another year because we don't have our SSI yet, but we're in the process of applying. And once you do that, they will extend Katie Beckett either until your child turns 19 or until your child gets SSI, which is going to get them on Medicaid. So Medicaid is not going to tell you this. Don't wait for them to send you the little letter that says, don't worry, just send us your application summary and you can extend Katie Beckett. You just have to know it. It's one of those things that you just have to hear somewhere. So now you've heard it and you know what to do. Another period where Medicaid can disappear and freak people out is that time when the child moves from SSI to SSDI, because remember, Medicaid is linked to SSI. So if you lose SSI, even if you lose it because you've moved over to SSDI, Medicaid may just stop. It's okay. You can get it back. What you need to do is reapply for Medicaid under the Adult Disabled Child Program. And I believe that there is an application for that type of Medicaid program on the Department of Community Health website. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that's how you would get Medicaid to continue while you're in that 2-year period where your child is on SSDI, but they're not yet on Medicare. So we've already talked about these comparisons, but just quickly, obviously Medicaid is means tested. Medicare is not means tested. Medicaid is linked to SSI. Medicare is linked to either your age, we all get it when we turn 65, or to whether you have been qualified for 2 years to be receiving SSDI. Medicaid keeps a running tally of everything that they spend on you and they seek reimbursement at death. Medicare does not do that. So there's no Medicare payback at death. So I think we've already answered this question, but the answer to this question of when we can stop worrying about the means test is never. You should never, ever stop worrying about the means test. We always care about the means test. And that's because of all of these other types of Medicaid, which are means tested and which your child could be getting even after they are on SSDI and Medicare. So these are just a couple of additional means tested benefits that I talked about really briefly at the beginning, and I made a couple slides about them just because they're things that people don't necessarily think about or know about. So this SNAP program, this is what we used to call food stamps. In many counties in Georgia, including Cobb, there is a work requirement to qualify for SNAP benefits, but that work requirement is waivable. So if you can demonstrate that you have a disability that prevents you from working, then you don't have to meet that work requirement to qualify for SNAP benefits. You have to have a net income that is below the poverty level. And so for a single person, because remember your child is a household of one here, for the purposes of this test, it's $13,000 and something a year is the federal poverty limit for one person, for a one-person household. And there is a means test that applies to SNAP benefits. It's a little higher than the means test for SSI and Medicaid. So the means test here is $3,750 as opposed to $2,000. So if you can pass the means test for those other benefits, then of course you're going to be well under this $3,750. So you've overcome the asset test. So the greatest amount that you can get this year in SNAP benefits is $250 a month. They will calculate exactly what you're entitled to get based on a formula. And that formula will look at things like whether you have any income and how much income that is. So I've put the website up here in case you want to look more closely at these rules or maybe submit an application. And what you end up getting if your child does get SNAP benefits is a debit card that just looks like any other debit card. And you can just take it to the grocery store and buy food with it. So it's not something that a lot of my families think about, but your child is probably entitled to it. So I don't see any reason why you shouldn't apply for it. So this is the last benefit that I wanted to just mention. It's a very little known benefit and it only applies to certain people, but if it applies to you, then it's something you should know about. So there is this thing, it's called the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund Commission. And it's a statewide trust fund that will provide up to $10,000 in distributions over the lifetime of an applicant. In order to qualify, you have to be a legal resident of Georgia, and you have to have a traumatic brain injury or a spinal cord injury that either came from an accidental injury or a self-inflicted injury. So if you have a traumatic brain injury from, say, a stroke, you don't qualify. So this trust fund is a payer of last resort, which means they want to see that you have applied for and gotten all the other benefits that you're entitled to. So you can't say, you know, well, I may be qualified for SSI, but I haven't applied for it. Will you give me some money? They're going to say no, come back after you've applied for SSI and show us that you're using all your SSI money and you still need more money. So, you know, it will pay for specific things that are designed to promote the independence and inclusion of the recipient. So that could be transportation, it could be some type of adaptive equipment that your child might need, like a wheelchair. It could even be things like camps or classes or training of some kind. They will not just send you a check. So you would need to get qualified for a distribution and then seek and then submit an invoice from a provider. And they won't pay you, they'll pay the provider of the service. And the website for this is right there. And I have this on a later slide as well, if you are panicking about writing that down. This isn't really exactly related to benefits, but we had somebody write in before this talk and ask if I was going to talk about these things. So I just made them a slide. Hello, person who wrote in. This is your slide just for you. This is somebody wanted to know the differences between special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. So in both cases, the assets that you put in are exempt for purposes of the means test. The difference is you can put any amount of money into a special needs trust and it is an exempt resource. You could put $10 million into a special needs trust and your child could still qualify for SSI. ABLE accounts, the assets that you put into an ABLE account are exempt for the means test only up to $100,000. So when you get to $100,001, then the money in the ABLE account begins to reduce SSI. And if there's enough in there, it can just wipe out SSI altogether. And as I mentioned, you can put any amount of money into a special needs trust. There's no limit. ABLE accounts do have contribution limits in addition to asset limits. So you're allowed to put up to $16,000 a year into an ABLE account. And if your child has earnings from a job up to that federal poverty level, that's 13,000 and something, then your child can also put that additional amount into the ABLE account, but only if they don't have a 401k plan or other type of employer-sponsored plan. And if you're using a third-party special needs trust, so that is our classic estate planning trust that I'm going to talk about at great length in a month, then there is no Medicaid payback at death for any assets that remain in the special needs trust. If you're putting funds into an ABLE account, there is a Medicaid payback at death. So those are the big differences. We'll talk about that more in a month. So these are the resources that I put up earlier on the earlier slides. So these are just websites that you might want to check out. And I believe that's it for us. And it is time for us to have questions. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to. Here's next month's talk. Alexa made this nice little slide and sent it to me. And here it is. So on Thursday, May 19th, starting at 6, we're going to do another one of these talks, and it's going to be all about special needs planning, which is my favorite kind of work to do and my favorite thing to talk about. So we are going to do that May 19th. And with that, I am truly done. And I believe we have time to take questions if there are any questions.
Thank you, Kim. So in order to be fair to everyone, what we've done is you're kind of locked on mute. So in order to ask a question, if you go down to the bottom toolbar on Zoom, there's a little icon that says reactions. And if you click that, there should be a little hand, and you can raise your hand and I will request to unmute you. And then you can ask your question to Kim, or you can go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll read it out to Kim. Ready, go. And yes, we are recording this session. And just give us a couple weeks. We're gonna get it edited, and then we will send it out to you guys via email. I should have everyone's email address if you signed up on Zoom. And I'm gonna send out just a mass email and share it with you guys.
So Alexa, are you going to post this on the Special Needs Cobb website, or are you saying that you're going to send everybody the recording?
I'm going to send everyone the recording, but we're also going to post it on our website and the Harrison and Health website.
Right. Yes, we will post it on the firm website as soon as I get it, and get it to my IT people who know how to do things like that.
Good. Okay, Sarat has a question. I'm going to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, thanks for arranging this webinar. I got a lot of information. My question is, you mentioned about ABLE account. So when I put, so I applied for SSI, and let's say there is excess money that has not been used for that month.
Mhm.
Could I put that in an ABLE account? But what are the reasons that I can utilize the ABLE account money from? Like, can I still utilize it for food and clothing and boarding expenses from the ABLE account?
Sure. Yes, you can. So that's the one exception to that food and shelter rule, the in-kind support and maintenance rule. So let's say your child lives at Just People, which is more than $841 a month. So there's nothing we can do about it. His food and shelter costs are more than $841 a month, and that's just all there is to it. So you could pay the $841 a month out of the SSI money, and then you could make up the difference in the food and shelter costs out of the ABLE account. And if you do that, because it's coming out of the ABLE account, Social Security considers that to be your child's money, no matter where it came from. And so that is not considered in-kind support and maintenance. So they would not reduce the $841 a month.
Okay, and you also mentioned about SNAP benefit of a $250 max. So could I do that in addition to the SSI 841?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can.
So let's say I spend all the $250 for the food and food and clothing from the SNAP. Let's say there is some amount remaining from the 841, I can push that to ABLE account so that I can use it for the future. So that the means test.
So Social Security benefits are non-assignable, meaning that the month in which your child receives that SSI money, it has to stay in their account. So very likely, if you're applying for SSI for your child, they will probably name you or the other parent as the representative payee for the SSI money. And if that is the case, then you have the power, of course, to get in there and spend the money, pay yourself rent, or, spend it in whatever way you need to cover food and shelter costs. So the month after the month in which the SSI money is paid, it just becomes money. And at that point, you can put it into an ABLE account if you want to. And you do have a $2,000 cushion. So you would probably, what you should do is open a rep payee account. So it would have, so if you're the rep payee, it would say your name as rep payee for, and then your child's name. And you only want to put Social Security money into that rep payee account because you have to do an annual accounting to Social Security for what you've done with that SSI money every year. And if you're putting in like the birthday check or your child's little paycheck or whatever, you will lose your mind. So have a rep payee account that has your name or whoever the rep payee is, the person's name as rep payee for child's name, and then only put SSI money in there. And if it gets close to $2,000, take $1,000 out and stick it in an ABLE account.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much. That cleared up.
Awesome. Okay. So we have a question from Rob, and then we have a question from Linda. That's a direct message. So let's go to Rob.
Hello?
You're there. We can hear you.
I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this, so this may end up being a little bit more of a dialogue. Sorry. How does it work with the parents' social? It was breaking up a little. I didn't catch exactly how one thing, the parent Social Security ends up potentially benefiting the child. And right now I'm divorced, and my son turns 18 in literally just about 4 months. So we're having some of these discussions with his school because we just got some of the paperwork about guardianship and all that today. So I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this. I'm trying to figure out how the benefits work and between his mother and I, because I also pay her child support. What is the best way to potentially maximize his benefits? I mean, I make more than I've always made more than she did, and now she's only working part-time. So attaching him to my Social Security would eventually give him much greater benefits than hers. But would that have to be done very early on, like having me as the guardian, attached as the guardianship?
The guardianship has nothing to do with that whatsoever. And in fact, you don't get to attach him to anybody's Social Security. What will happen is if either one of his parents has one of those three things happen. So remember, if a parent dies, becomes disabled, and starts to draw Social Security disability themselves, or hopefully this is the one we hope will happen, if they retire and begin to draw Social Security on their own work record, regardless of which parent it is, the first one to have to do one of those three things will cause the child to roll off of SSI onto SSDI, and the SSDI payments will be made based on the work record of that parent. But if a second parent then does one of those three things, so let's say hypothetically your wife retires before you do, and she has a smaller earnings history than you do. So that could still cause your child to roll from SSI to SSDI based on what your wife is getting, ex-wife, I'm sorry, is getting in Social Security. But then let's say 5 years later, you retire and you start to draw Social Security. So assuming that you are getting more in Social Security every month because your earnings record is greater, then Social Security would redo the math for your child and just boost up their SSDI to reflect your earnings record. So they always use the highest earning parent that is an eligible parent, regardless of what you do. You don't get to pick. That's just how they're going to do it. But something you should be worried about is the child support that you're paying, if you're paying child support beyond the age of 18, that is going to, they'll disregard $20 of the child support. And after age 18, all of the rest of that child support that's being paid for your special needs child is going to offset SSI dollar for dollar.
Okay, and yeah, he will be on, he could be on child support up until age, potentially as late as age 20. Because
That's-
after he's finished,
yourself, but it's, so for example, if, let's say, I'll just make up numbers. Let's say that you're paying $1,000 a month in child support for that child. We're going to disregard $20. So
Right.
that leaves us with $980 in child support, right? SSI is $841 a month. So if we're offsetting SSI dollar for dollar, we're going to wipe out SSI altogether. It's fixable, but that's what's going to happen if you don't do anything, which means no SSI, no Medicaid. And essentially what you're doing, if you do it that way, is that your family's resources are taking the place of SSI. So the way that you would fix that is you would revise your settlement agreement to provide that you're required, and it has to be a requirement. This can't be voluntary. So the settlement agreement just has to require you as the paying parent to pay child support to a particular type of special needs trust called a first party special needs trust. I'm going to talk about this in a month, but I know that's in a month, which doesn't help you right now. But it's a special type of trust that is designed to hold resources that belong to the child in some way. So because your child has an enforceable interest in that child support, so in other words, if you stopped paying it, your child would have a legal standing to sue you. Not that they would, but they could legally sue you if you didn't pay your child support to take care of them. So that legal interest in those payments is what causes that money to be first party money. And that's why Social Security considers it to be income that's attributable to your child. So it's totally fixable, but
yeah, there was a second half of the question, but I think you answered it. I was going to ask if we actually have to have that agreement updated in writing that it goes to. You said, what was it, a first party?
A first party special needs trust.
Okay.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I mean, there are certain divorce lawyers who now understand that when you are getting a divorce with a special needs child, that is not just business as usual. And so sometimes they'll bring me in even before the divorce is done and just hire me to look at their settlement agreement just for that specific issue.
Thank you.
So, yeah, you're welcome. This is a very specific little teeny thing that a lot of people don't know.
Okay. Our next question is from Linda. She said, how long does the family support application normally take? I submitted an application over a month ago and I'm having trouble getting anyone to respond to my submission.
It varies a lot from one county to another. If you're in Cobb, I know that Cobb has, well, everybody's been hit hard by COVID, so it's not fair to say Cobb has been hit hard. But I know, for example, that their probate courts they had a lot of judges go down with COVID early on, and they're being very cautious. And it's possible that something like that is going on. If you were in one of the counties that's definitely served by the Bobby Dodd Institute, I would tell you to contact the Bobby Dodd Institute. And I'm not saying that they're lightning fast, but they're big enough and they have enough staff so that you'd be more likely to get a quick response. I'm not sure who administers family support in Cobb County. It might be worth it to just call the Bobby Dodd Institute and see if they can help you. That's not one of the counties that's explicitly listed as one of the 6 counties that they serve, but they are allowed to help people from other counties in some circumstances. So the short answer to your question is I don't know how long it's going to take you to get family support. I know the funding for that, along with a lot of other types of funding, got frozen during COVID because Georgia was just underwater and just opted not to allow any new applications. So it's possible that they're just not even processing applications right now. I
Okay.
wish I had better news for you.
Okay, Linda can't respond because she's at an event, but Linda, if you need a follow-up question, just send me a DM. Robin had a question. They said my son started on SSI in January. I need to write his rent letter. When I spoke with someone at Social Security, we figured out $661. I'm afraid that it's too high. If I don't include food, it is $556. Should I use that amount and apply for SNAP?
I think you should use the number that Social Security is happy with. If they're happy with $661, then I think it should be for $661.
Okay.
I mean, all of this is a little bit of a fiction. You're going to let your child live in his room and you're going to let him go to the refrigerator and eat whatever he wants to eat. You're not going to sit there with a calculator every time your child takes a banana off the counter. So, really the room and board agreement is there for the purpose of demonstrating to Social Security that you're not giving your child room and board. You're selling him room and board. So if $661 makes somebody happy at Social Security, then I say, by all means, make Social Security happy and make it $661.
Okay. And then we have a question from Kamala. They said, what's a third-party trust versus a first-party special needs trust? And can we have a special needs trust and able accounts, both of them? Thanks.
Okay, so this is totally what I'm talking about in a month. But yes, you can have special needs trust and an able account. You can only have one able account, but you can have as many special needs trusts as you want. My son has 3. But the 2 kinds that people typically have is the third-party trust. It's called that because it's designed to hold third-party assets. And what that means is assets that belong to anybody in the world except your child. So a third-party special needs trust can hold your assets. It can hold grandma and grandpa's assets. It can hold gifts from friends who want to just do something nice for your child. It just cannot hold assets that belong to your child. The first-party trust, first-party special needs trust, sometimes it's also called a D4A trust, or sometimes you'll hear it called a self-settled trust. That is the type of special needs trust that is designed to hold first-party assets. That means assets that belong to the child. So when I was talking to the dad a minute ago about the child support payments having to go into a first-party trust, the reason they need to go into a first-party trust is because Social Security has decided that child support is a resource that's available to the child, so it's first-party money. So the first-party trust is not really an estate planning trust. It's kind of a damage control trust. It's the trust that we use when some well-intentioned person gives our child a whole bunch of money, or the child wins the lottery, or they are in a car accident and they get damages, and now we're freaking out because we have more than $2,000 and we need to get rid of it. The first party trust is sort of a parking space, just like an able account. An able account is also a parking space. So if you have assets that are in an able account or in a first party trust, that's perfectly fine. They're exempt for purposes of the means test, but those are the first assets that you want to use up for the child because there's Medicaid payback at the child's death.
All right, does anybody else have any more questions? We've got about 6 or so minutes that we can do more questions. Robin and Kamala both said thanks. Kim?
You're welcome.
Anybody?
So if we have a little minute, Alexa,
Yeah.
it just occurred to me that I should probably mention this. I should have made a slide. I didn't make a slide, but I am also doing another talk. It's at Focus. It's a virtual talk, so you can register for it just like this one. And it's called Turning 18 in Special Needs Land. So it's all about all the different things that happen when your child turns 18 and it's time to possibly petition for guardianship or apply for SSI or all the other stuff. 18 is a big age. So I don't have exactly the date, but it's about 2 weeks from now. And if you go to the Focus website, you should see it. And I'm just mentioning it because we seem to have a couple minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna be sending everyone a follow-up email, probably Monday, Tuesday, and Kim, if you send me the link,
Yeah,
then I'll send it to everybody.
okay, thank you. It just occurred to me that I should have probably said something about that. I'm gonna write myself a note. So,
And Jen said it's April 28th.
oh, thank you.
All right, and Rob asked if your slides would be available. Am I able to email your slides out to everyone?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I'll make sure I include that in the follow-up email.
Do you need me to send them to you, right?
Yeah, and
Format.
I'll send it to everyone Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, I'm sending you the flyer for Focus and my PowerPoint
Okay,
today.
cool. All right, and before everybody heads out, I just want to say thank you for your questions. We appreciate your participation. Kim already showed you the flyer for it, but we do have another workshop coming up on May 19th. There you go, right there. And I'll send that to everyone as well, because it definitely seems like there's some people in here that can benefit from that. So I'll send everyone that and Kim's workshop at Focus, and then the slide deck as well. And then in a couple more weeks, once we get this video edited, we'll send that out to everyone, let you know that it's up on the websites. So just an FYI, everyone who signed up for this Zoom, you've been added to a personal email list of mine that I use to communicate with people about special needs workshops. So if you ever see an email from me, it's probably going to be about a workshop. So just keep an eye on those, make sure that you open those. I do at least 6 of these a year is my goal this year. I may even do 8. And anytime that you have any suggestions of topics that you want to hear, or certain speakers you would like to see, please let me know. It's my responsibility to make sure that you special needs parents are heard and you guys get information and education on topics that you specifically want. So please let me know. And if you ever have any constructive criticism, let me know. If you do not want to be on that email list, just send me an email back and just let me know to take you off of it. I promise I won't be too upset. So like I said, I'm gonna send out a follow-up email. I'll send that out Monday or Tuesday. It'll have all this information and Kim's slide deck. Kim, do you have anything else that you want to add before we close out?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have this wonderful IT guy who is so good at putting things up on our website at the firm. So as I do talks and podcasts and whatever, we're building up sort of a little library of those things at the firm.
Okay.
We're in the process of redoing our website, so I don't know what condition it's in right now, but just in general, if people have questions about any aspect of special needs stuff, there is possibly going to be a video or a podcast or something from me on the firm website.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah,
it
make
might
sure
be
that
worth-
I'll leave a link to that in the follow-up email as well to y'all's website. Hold on, someone said. Okay, Julie Sharp said she would love to review on now comp waivers. Yeah, that's a popular topic. We're definitely going to be doing that in the next couple months. All right, yeah, I think that's all. Thank you guys for participating. If you have any additional questions for Kim, you can give her a call or email. If you have any questions or comments about workshops, give me a call or email. We're happy to provide additional support, answer your questions. Have a good Friday and a good weekend, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.